This is the best part. You get to hear directly from the finalists. So each finalist is going to share with you the neuroscience concept that they chose, the 3 art synectic triggers that they used, and as well as their COVID word. And
Julie, we had a question from Stephen White just before we begin. Is there any weighting to specific types of art medium?
And this was open to any art medium, but the majority of it was digital art. Good question.
And we also have another question. How will someone vote for an art piece?
Yes, so after all 10 finalists present, we will do a poll and you will get to vote for your one favorite and submit your answer. And that will be after all 10 have presented. Okay. So our finalists have put a lot of work into their art, and I'm really excited for you to get to hear from them. The first one is Holly Havens with her piece Smoke and Mirror Neurons. Holly, go ahead.
So I like to think of boredom as a creative springboard. Like this phrase popped into my head randomly, like over and over again as I sat alone working on art or making TikToks and other like creative outlets I had time for at the beginning of the year, which I hadn't had time for in a very long time. And we often, like, we don't have enough boredom in our lives. People are scared of it. And this year we got a lot more than we bargained for. When the year started, I was working full-time, going to school full-time, trying to maintain a social life, and then it all stopped and I was isolated and just left alone. And I tried to convey that feeling in this piece, and it wasn't really like I was alone, but it wasn't a feeling of loneliness. It was a feeling of being more connected, and I had time to connect with myself. I had time to connect with my family and my friends, and I think it was a really kind of contradictory year in that sense, because a lot of us had finally time to do these things and connect in ways that maybe we hadn't made time for before. So when I was reading about mirror neurons, I was really struck by the way our brains are kind of wired to seek out others and feel what they feel and mimic their emotions without even thinking about it, without even knowing it. So in order to bring these concepts to life, I started with a sketch of smoke and was able to kind of bring a sense of repetition through this. I inserted it into the image and flipped it around and added it several times in order to isolate. I had a barrier of these like kind of just scribbly lines in between a few of the layers and used a gradient. And to contradict the isolating effect, I added the child. He's cozy and warm and sitting in this almost bubble, kind of contradicting all the scariness going on around him. So thanks so much.
Thanks, Holly. Next is Compassion versus Empathy by Bonnie Abbott.
Hi. So there's a lot to say about this piece. It started as an assignment, but it developed into so much more than that. My neuroscience concept was kindness training. My synectics was contradict, repeat, and substitute. And my COVID concept word was long. I actually made this piece in the midst of my self-isolation, and it's definitely reflected in this piece. The bottom half is chaotic. It's infecting the brain like static on an old TV or an orchestra tuning before the performance. This is meant to represent empathy and its negative effects. The article that this piece is based on theorizes that when we practice empathy, we take on another's distress. In the long run, this affects our own mental stability, but it also deepens our connection and our understanding. In contrast, the top part is controlled, like instead of it being infected, the brain is emitting controlled beauty, almost like bars of music. This is compassion. It is the ability to recognize another's distress and assist them without taking on that mental burden. The article states that the practice of compassion will reduce the negative effects and will encourage someone to continue and even increase their kindness. Even though this piece seems very black and white, notice that there's a lot of grays. Even in the top half is messy. This concept is not easy, and nor should it be. There is credit to compassion, but there's also credit to empathy, and oftentimes we should approach someone with both. In this quarantine season, we have the ability to empathize with everyone because we're all going through the same thing. But we also have to be careful and maintain our own mental stability. In the end, we should always just try to be kind to the best of our abilities.
Great. Thank you, Bonnie. Next is Hale Sweetser with Connection. Hale, you're on mute. We can't hear you.
Is it working?
Yes, thank you.
Excellent, thanks. Sorry, my camera quality's poor. But my concept was connection, and couldn't. So during the brainstorming for my project, I felt a lot of similar ideas about my concept word is that word wall we saw earlier, and I chose connectivity, which felt obvious and appropriate to discuss in the socially distanced world of the COVID pandemic. And I was talking with my friends the other day about COVID has relegated all social interaction to being Teams meetings and Discord calls. And that resonated with me because I do consider myself an extrovert and I love spending time with people. And it was interesting to reflect on the impact of not being able to physically meet my friends. And we've all been feeling very disconnected. The connections are feeling more like a poor substitute than, and as amazing as it is to not be entirely disconnected from everybody, it comes into that feeling of dissociation, which was my COVID word. And that's what I attempted to invoke with the image in the background. And that's how I use my syntax as well. They were fragment, superimpose, and symbolize. And I chose these because I believe they synergize best with both the neuroscience concept itself and the concept of dissociation. Because being disconnected from others and dissociating have a literal meaning of breaking apart or cutting away from a whole. So it made fragmentation an obvious choice, where you see the chairs cropped into shards, and helps to like signify the distance and the space between them creates that hole in the center of the piece with the dead tree. The symbolized kinetic can be seen in the shape I use to connect me and my friends. It's the sharing icon, which represents us all being connected, but all physically separated. And on its own, the share symbol only conveys its connection, but layering it over the empty chairs and the reaching out branches of the tree is an attempt to show that physical distance. And my piece is meant to show like stagnation, patiently waiting for the opportunity to spend time with our closest friends again. And just the repeating lines of seats show a passage of time that remains at just kind of a crawl with no one to spend time with. It's just about the inadequacy and shortcomings of distant socializing and the feelings of dissociation that come with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Hale. Next is Michael Rodriguez with Breaking Out of the Mold.
Oh, hello, everybody. My name is Michael A. Rodriguez, and this is my piece, Breaking Out of the Mold. For this work, I chose the neuroscience concept of the parasympathetic nervous system. I believe that this piece connects and resonates with the idea of parasympathetics as it paints a literal picture of the concept. In neuroscience, the concept of a parasympathetic nervous system explains that by practicing empathy and compassion, you can not only increase the influence and strength of those emotions for yourself, but you also strengthen your resistance to stress and depression. I found this idea very similar to the simplistic practice of muscle training and decided to portray the brain as a projection of oneself, making my character appear physically strong and pink so that the viewer may make this connection. As the character changes throughout the piece, its body language changes from static and lifeless to confident and strong as it breaks out of the mold. Furthermore, I chose the synectics of metamorphose, animate, and repeat to help aid in the work's message. I felt that out of all the options, these would best help me represent the change that the brain undergoes to become stronger and more resistant. To show metamorphosis in a stationary image, it would make sense to repeat parts of the image, such as the mold, and then animate the character to imply movement for the viewer, playing off the concept of stop motion animation as the main inspiration for the piece. Throughout the process, I wanted to show change in a realistic format, and thusly settled upon change as my concept word, figuring that I could show change in a realistic way, relevant to how it feels from a first-person perspective, granted. But by proceeding with my implied stop motion idea, I sensed that the lack of motion in between the phases of the character's metamorphosis would more realistically reflect the concept of internal development, as oftentimes we rarely notice when we have changed ourselves. Finally, I wanted to add a little cherry on top to give my piece some personality that also contributed to the message. This final addition was the flexing pose that I have my character perform in the third phase of its metamorphosis. In my opinion, I feel as if the pose implies that the character is confident and happy with its change, which directly reflects to the results of practicing reinforcement over criticism for a person's mind and mental state, according to how our nervous system and mind works. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Michael.
Mm-hmm.
Next, we have Color Within the Darkness by Anthony Lopez.
Hello, my name is Anthony Lopez, and my work focuses on the parasympathetic nervous system. I gravitated towards this neuroscience concept because I became interested in the major role it plays in suppressing the stress-inducing fight or flight responses that are responsible for the enabling of depressive symptoms. In my research, I learned that one can utilize their parasympathetic nervous system to practice compassionate mind training. And this involves the act of altering one's self-regulatory system style from one of self-criticism to self-reassurance. The latter is defined as the ability to be encouraging, resilient, and aware of one's positive qualities and capabilities in the face of setbacks, mistakes, or failures. And as each and every one of us is living a life that is drastically more challenging than before, I think this type of thinking has never been more needed than now. My first synectic is repeat, and it's prominently displayed in the background of my work as the repetitiveness of the squares are meant to simulate a sense of monotony within the setting and a cage that traps the main character within its walls. My second synectic is isolation, and it's displayed through the use of the single character as nothing else surrounds her but two benches. My third synectic is contradiction, and here the contradiction of work, I think, in this work, I think it provides hope. Self-criticism is a practice that can be extremely brutal, and finding the strength to continually practice self-reassurance can be difficult, a bit like finding color within the darkness. But I want to remind everyone that every day we have the choice of how to see the world around us. For example, the colors of the bench here can be perceived in two ways. It can be seen as the final pieces of color being forgotten, or it can be seen as the return of the recognition of color. Lastly, my concept word is grit. Now, there are many definitions for grit. One is the combination of passion and perseverance for long-term goals. Another is simply courage. And I think what both of these definitions share is the ability to withstand and keep pushing. And living in a world with COVID amplifies the necessity for this. Engaging in grit undoubtedly allows for the development of a self-reassurance regulatory style. That is, the ability for one to find the understanding, effort, and ability to be less harsh and instead train one's mind to be more kind to the self. This work conveys the possibility of the choices that we can make each day, the limbo in between hopelessness and hope, and the power that we have in determining how we perceive the world around us. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. Next is Sydney Smith with her work Dissonance.
Hello, my name is Sydney Smith, and yeah, this is my piece that I did. The neuroscience concept that I chose for this was connectivity. I think it was definitely a popular concept, but for a good reason, because it kind of is the antithesis of what the COVID experience meant for many people. The synectic triggers I decided to use were empathize, contradict, and disguise. So empathize is kind of something that was an overarching kind of meaning of my piece. I wanted to try and get the audience to feel the kind of intense disconnect that I felt from the world during my COVID-19 experience, which also kind of connects to the next synectic word, which is contradict. And I think I would say that this is probably the most prominent concept in my work, which is contradicting imagery. So throughout my piece, you can find pieces of technology and objects that relate to the concept of connection with the pictures that I took of my various personal technological devices like a laptop, tablet, and phone, as well as the cords that are connected to the girl. But the contradiction here is that all the screens of the devices are blank and black, and the cords lead to nowhere pretty much, and they're not even truly connected to the girl. They're kind of just overlaid on top. Both of these concepts are present only to give the illusion of connection and synthetic kindness, which is something that I felt was an appropriate way to kind of describe the way that connections had to be made throughout COVID, and everybody suddenly having to transition from having real intense connections to more kind of disconnected ones and synthetic ones. And then the last concept was disguise, which is more of a smaller piece, but I essentially used it in that bottom right corner of the piece where you can see the mirror, which you probably wouldn't recognize to be one at first, but my intention in making the reflective part of the mirror with a no signal kind of graphic normally found on TVs was to disguise it as another one of the screens surrounding the girl. The meaning behind this portion was to describe the loss of sense of self that I think a lot of us felt and that I felt myself falling into during quarantine, not being able to empathize with people as much anymore and simply just feeling that kind of TV static inside my head. And that's the same reason why I chose that kind of background for the piece. And then arching up to my overall word for this piece, which was disconnect. Essentially the antithesis of the concept that I chose, which is connectivity. And I think it's a great word to describe both the physical and like mental implications of the quarantine and COVID experience. Both kind of ways of defining disconnect cover both like the physical sense of isolation, but also the mental sense. And that kind of comes with the detachment that you feel when you're not able to really make in-person connections with people. Thank you.
Thank you, Sydney. Next, we have Reflection by Jade Nguyen.
Hello, my name is Jade Nguyen, and I am a current freshman at UTD. I will be presenting my artwork, Reflection. The main concept behind my piece is the word reflection. Reflection is a powerful word that encourages self-understanding as it forces us to examine and explore deeper meaning within ourselves. I thought this term was most suitable during this pandemic as the virus has caused us to disconnect from other people. Therefore, many of us had to direct our attention to ourselves and learn who we are without others. To incorporate reflection, I use the notion of mirror neurons for my neurological concept. Mirror neurons are fundamental to feelings of empathy and are crucial to building relationships. Due to quarantine, there are fewer interactions between people. It causes us not to be as empathetic towards others and start to focus on ourselves, giving us time to reflect. In a way, it is a good thing. I also thought it would be a fun play on words using mirror neurons with the word reflection. I symbolize this self-reflection using mirror neurons through a broken mirror. Fragmentation is expressed through the mirror's shattered pieces, allowing people to see each part of themselves more in depth. To create the illusion of a broken mirror, I scaled each part of my face differently. The repeated use of cracks in the mirror represents the magnitude of the different aspects of a person. By doing so, it helps capture the uniqueness of a person. The circuit surrounding the broken mirror represents the decline of neurons firing as we have fewer interactions with people during this pandemic, so the light bulbs are not lit. I also added a downsized picture of myself holding an empty handheld mirror to represent the lack of interactions with another person since there is no other person to emulate. Thank you for listening to my presentation and for your time.
Thank you, Jade. Next, we have Kindness Connects by Zarah and Najmi.
Hello. Okay, so my neuroscience concept for this artwork is connectivity, and my COVID concept word is network. As you know, connectivity is especially important during COVID-19, and the one thing connecting us is the internet, which is a giant network. And for my art, I wanted to show kindness and love, which is something we're all looking for nowadays, a bit of good among the bad, as an ever-growing network that inspires and connects people together. So my first synecdoche is symbolize. Now, as you can see, the centerpiece for my artwork is a massive ASL sign for love. And there is a single path of the network going up the arm and then into the heart at the center, where it branches out into 3 more, which branch out into even more. And this symbolizes one person showing a little bit of kindness, which inspires a few more who inspire even more. The branches continue to grow outwards, connecting more and more people through love and kindness. For analogy, well, a network in and of itself is an analogy for connectivity, which I show here as a series of connecting lines and dots. My third one is isolate, and I wanted to focus on the action of connecting with others and how connections forged by kindness can grow outwards. Also, the network here is a tiny little thing, unlike the internet, which is absolutely massive. And it goes to show that it only takes one small act of goodwill to get the snowball rolling. You never know, just smiling at someone in passing may make their entire day better. After all, we're looking for a little bit of good in a world filled with bad nowadays.
Awesome, thank you, Zarah. Next is Isolation by Netta Gassemi.
Hi, I'm Netta Gassemi, and this is my artwork. So the year 2020 has been a very unique experience for us all. So for my project, I chose to illustrate the isolation that I'm sure many of us have dealt with during COVID. I know that I have. I selected to use the... I'm sorry, there's noise going on upstairs. Okay, so I selected the neuroscience concept of mirror neurons and the fantasize, distort, and subtract synectics for my design. Though they're used a little bit more subtly, the choices that I made had a lot of intention. So the concept of mirror neurons really resonated with me, as I feel that empathy and the connections that you create with people, whether consciously or subconsciously, are extremely impactful and valuable. The illustration of the fantasized synectic is demonstrated mainly through the subject literally fantasizing about a life that used to be hers and is longing for now. And I'm the subject, so this is how I was feeling, at least during COVID. It's also shown through the sunny and gloomy day occurring at the same time. So on the right, where the main subject is sitting, it's gloomier as she's isolated and longing for the mirrored image, though she's trying to mirror the emotions and smiling. And then the left side with the mirror is brighter. So to portray the distortion synectic, I chose the blur tool to distort the image reflecting in the mirror, which provides a more metaphoric meaning on how the image is not the reality the subject is living in. In actuality, she's alone in her isolation, but the image shows otherwise. And so as a result, the distorted reflection emphasizes the fact that this is a mere fantasy. And then the synectic of subtraction may not be as apparent, but its targeted placement holds a lot of significance. So the hole in the subject's chest represents like the absence of a heart, or like the warmth and liveliness that's like ripped away from her, which is dramatic, but it's just like going through something like this, it's just like it's taken away from you. Just don't really feel like that whenever you're alone sometimes. So she's appearing to smile while mirroring the emotions again, but the observer can tell that it's just a facade. And then I also added black brush marks to make the whole blend in more with the image. And then the word I chose for my experience with COVID was isolation, which I incorporated this word by making the setting for the concept in the middle of a vast grassland that is far away from any other human contact. COVID has definitely isolated many people from the rest of the world, and this concept creates an important narrative on isolation and the emotions that may come with it. In the end, though, I was choosing between making it black and white or like adding some color, but I added a little bit of color into it so you can see that in the end, life is ready to reflourish. So yes, thank you.
Thank you, Netta. Okay, and last we have The Art of Isolation by Tania Kadar.
Hi, my name is Tania Kadar, and my piece, The Art of Isolation, was inspired by the concept of change, the synthetic triggers distort, repeat, and contradict, and the neurokindness research based on connectivity. I chose connectivity primarily because I believe, as ironic as it sounds, it was through disconnecting with the rest of the world that I could really connect with myself and my identity as an immigrant woman, a Muslim artist, and an American teenager. And by understanding myself, I have learned to have kindness for myself, which is something that I've always struggled with. So through my synthetic triggers, I show distort by a distortion of my self-portrait, as well as distortion in the background, to highlight the change in myself and the world around me, as our old lifestyles were very much distorted by the pandemic. And I even did this in contour, which I would have never done a year ago, which once again is showing my growth as an artist and my growth as a person. I repeat by repetition of the circles to mirror how many days in isolation seem almost like a Groundhog Day situation. And I actually created this through code because I wanted to, I guess, mirror all the very different types of the areas of the contest, which were CS and art. So, and finally, contradict, which I showed through the pieces of color that contrast with my portrait to symbolize my character development that I underwent during quarantine. Thank you.
Thank you, Tania. All right, so now Catherine is going to make the poll go live and you will get to vote for your favorite piece. So you get to just vote for only one, and we'll give you just a minute or two to get your votes in. Okay, I think we can go ahead and close the poll down. I just want to say amazing job to all of our finalists. You can tell they put a lot of work into their pieces, and it was really great to get to hear about your work straight from you. So thank you so much. Okay, so really quickly, I just want to let you know what's coming next. I don't know. I know we are at time. It's 8:01, and so I want to respect everybody's time. I just want to let you know that we are working with the City of Dallas, and the Office of Arts and Culture has given us a Culture of Value micro grant. And so upcoming is that we're going to be developing, really this is just the beginning. We are going to be developing a web-based artist talk series coming up in the next few weeks. We'll be interviewing different artists, featuring really Alana artists, which Alana, that term stands for African, Latin, Asian, Arab, Native American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islanders. So really these underserved communities, and wanting to really feature these artists. And so look out for that. And so we had a little teaser video, but I think we're straight to our winners without any further ado. So I am super excited to announce first the People's Choice Award goes to, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a second. Okay, the People's Choice Award goes to Zarah Najmi. If you want to turn on your camera real quick and just wave and say thank you, Zarah, you got the People's Choice Award.
Hey, thank you, everyone. Really appreciate it. GG. My brother just came into the room. Yep.
Okay, and then now I want to announce our 3 official winners. Netta Gassemi, you are one of the winners. You want to turn on your camera and say hello and thank you.
Hi. Thank you.
Congratulations. Okay, another one of our winners is Jade Nguyen. Jade, congratulations.
So much. Thank you.
And our 3rd and final winner is Holly Havens.
Thanks.
So I will follow up with the winners afterwards, and we'll get with you guys to get your awards. I just want to point everyone to our website, Neuroscience of Kindness. You can find that link on the event invitation, and you can see all of the artwork. We had over 100 submissions, and so it's sorted based on the 5 neuroscience concepts. So you can scroll through and see artwork inspired by connectivity, artwork inspired by mirror neurons, and you can browse through those. There's amazing work there. And so I hope that this event has helped you to create new connections between things that may have not seemed related before. We are such social creatures. We are really wired for this connection at our core. And these social connections are so important for our brain health. And so I just want to re-emphasize how much we need each other right now and how essential just compassion and kindness is to maintaining our humanity in the midst of this pandemic. Tomorrow, November 13th, is World Kindness Day. And so I hope that you will take what you have learned about the neuroscience of kindness. I hope that you are inspired by the vulnerability and the heart that the student artists have put into their work. And I charge and challenge you to be kind to yourselves, to be kind to your loved ones, and to be kind to people that you don't know. So thank you so much for attending, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Also, we'll mention if you'd like to tune in for our Sips in Science and Frontiers talk in December, Dr. Sarah Conrath is coming, and she is an expert on empathy. So if you liked what you saw and want to learn more about neuroscience, definitely check out our page of events. We have a lot of stuff coming up for you. So thank you again so much. Have a great evening and hope to see you all soon.